Jerry drove Dad in his old four-door diesel Mercedes all over Ontario, and Dad perfected his storytelling persona. As soon as Dad would go off script, as in telling his opinion about something, Jerry would lecture him all the way home. Nobody wants to hear about your philosophy of life and its lessons. Stick to your hockey stories. That was so true. In the next box was written radio show. When Dad came home from taping his first 5 radio shows, he said to Mom, I don't know how long I can keep this up. I may run out of stories. After at least 4,200 shows and 35 years of The Great Blind Show with Brian Williams, heard coast to coast on at least 100 radio stations, he never did run out. He used storytelling to impact Canadian culture and really cement, hockey as a part of Canadian culture. What was the importance of storytelling to Don Cherry sort of becoming who he was?
Well, I think, I think at that time it was important. Again, what happened was Dad met Jerry Patterson right after he got fired from Colorado, coaching the Colorado Rockies. And I think I'm pretty sure Dad kind of got blackballed because he went to war with two general managers. He went to war with Harrison and Ray Muron. And once you kind of do that, and you get the reputation that you're a coach that won't work with GMs, nobody wants to hire you, right? So, Ralph Mellenby asked him to do Hockey Night in Canada. It wasn't Coach's Corner then, and I think you got $500 a show for Hockey Night in Canada. So it wasn't something you're going to make a living on. And so Dad had met Jerry Patterson, and when Jerry would sit down and have a beer, Dad spent 18 years in the minors. Everything that happened in Slapshot Dad saw at worse, right? There was, he had, and so Jerry said, I think, these would be good things to go on the banquet circuit, and you could learn, tell these stories. Dad took a Dale Carnegie course when he was young. Yeah, how to win friends and influence people, and learn how to talk in front of people. And so he had a bit of knowledge on it, but he wasn't very good. He said the first 2 years he was doing it, but he watched guys like Dennis Hall and um, Story, who was a great storyteller, and Dennis Hall and some other ones. And then he kind of learned how to Red Story was the other guy, how to tell a proper joke, and that's basically what Dad got. Dad went up and told some hockey stories, told a couple jokes and stuff like that, and then he got more and more comfortable. And I think that helped Dad get, talking in front of a lot of people. Kind of the next step is getting in front of the television camera, and I think that helped him. So part of the storytelling was that Dad had so many stories, right? Because he lived this crazy life in the American Hockey League, and all not even the American Hockey League, all through minor hockey league, all through North America, and told, got pretty good at telling all these different stories with all these crazy characters like, Eddie Shore and Brian Kilray and Jimmy McKinney and all the crazy guys that he met during his time playing and coaching.
And I guess kind of on the heels of storytelling, because at this point it very much seems to run in the family. You wrote and produced Keep Your Head Up, Kid. What was the moment that you realized that you needed to tell the story?
Um, I just thought it was such a good story, and at that point, I forget, it was maybe about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Most of the people had grown up watching Dad on Coach's Corner, and Dad would say, "Oh, I coached the Bruins. Oh, you coached the Bruins. Oh, you played." Actually, people didn't realize that, what Dad's career was, because they had seen him for 25, 30 years on Coach's Corner. So I thought I just kind of wanted to. I like to write, so I sat down and I started to write the script. I got to a point where I thought, you know what, I think this would be good. So then I brought it to Dad, and Dad and I sat and we wrote a lot of stuff together, and got, yeah, put that in. No, I don't want to put this in, and stuff like that. And again, I kind of copied it on Goodfellas, where it's a story of my mom marrying my dad, and then all of a sudden joining this crazy, violent hockey life. And And it was, I think the people, it was one of the biggest miniseries that CBC have shown. I still think it holds the record for our first and second night. And it was very difficult to do, though. I mean, and it was by far the hardest thing I think I've ever had to do because it was so close to the bone.
Mm.
And like publishing and like writing, you know, once it started getting traction, too many people had their fingers in the pie of what they wanted to do, and there was just a lot of people that CBC that I just didn't think had a good concept of what we wanted to do, and we insisted on Jared Kiso to play Dad because he did kind of an interpretation, not an impersonation of Dad. And Jared went on to do Letterkenny and, a bunch of different other shows. He's been very successful. Um, so I just thought, and it was as much telling Mom's story as it was telling Dad's story of what my mom had to go through. And at one point, I had toyed with the idea of having it through Mom's using it through Mom's lens because, they always say that the best sports movie is Bull Durham. Well, that's told through Susan Sarandon's character, right? She
Mm.
does the voiceover. And I thought, why don't we do it through Mom's? And that was a little bit too radical. So we didn't. Um, and I think that when people watch it, they saw, okay, this is how Don Cherry kind of became the person we see on Coach's Corner. And I think that was important for me that, okay, you see this guy in Coach's Corner, but how did he become that guy in Coach's Corner?
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about what you mentioned with the challenges around it being so close to home and how as it gained traction, as it gained popularity, how do you think that narrative might have looked different had somebody else been left to tell that?
I, I think the big thing that Cindy and I, because Cindy helped quite a bit what on that was we wanted to have it authentic.
Hmm.
I remember early on, I had written the script and I went to CBC and they liked it and they says, well, we maybe want, this writer who had just won this writing prize to kind of go over it. So I was sitting there with him and he was saying, he was like, he said, I think what we want to do for the big scene where there was too many men on the ice, Guy Lafleur gets the puck and he goes up and he gives your dad a wink and he goes in and scores. I go, whoa. I go, no, this is through the eyes of dad. Like, like that would never happen in a million years. Like, what are you talking about? Well, and I think it would have been, that's why I think sports movies don't do well is because the people that write them don't know about sports. And quite frankly, I don't think they respect the sports.
Mm.
And what Cindy and I were talking about it, I says, um, I want to get actual footage, and Cindy agreed with me, of the Game 7 in Montreal and the Bruins games because you can't recreate that in real life. You can't create the Montreal Forum going crazy with 16,000 people in a 3-2 game. You can't create that. So you create a little bit on the bench with Jared and some of the actors, but for the actual action, you have it. You use footage from the National Hockey League. And I think that that's why people liked it and identified with it. And I just think that it was important that Cindy and I, and again, Cindy's a big part of that, told Mom and Dad's story.
Mm.
I think it's the authenticity that would have suffered, and I think that's a big thing in a lot of, well, a lot of, biographies or in movies.
In maintaining that authenticity, there's also some semblance of vulnerability at play that comes into that.
Yeah.
How did you balance being Don Cherry's son and a storyteller when it came to creating something that was so personal?
Well, I think, Cindy and I had a couple of discussions about that. And, I think the main priority was it had to be the gatekeeper of the story, and I had to do what Dad wanted to do. And a great story was that, um, Mom got cancer, right? And passed away. So how do we show that? Because it's a big part of the story. CBC wanted to show Mom in the hospital. And I was saying, no, we're not going to do that. It's a little bit too close to the bone, and it's not. So CBC and myself and Cindy got into this huge argument, and to the point where I said, well, if you want a scene of Mom in the hospital with tubes running out of her, let's just cancel. Let's just say forget it. And Jeff Wolna, who was the director, who did a great job, he said, let me handle it. I'll do it. And did it in a much more poignant way, where there was a scene where Mom and Dad and Blue were in a park bench, and Mom was talking about, you getting a new host, Ron McLean. Be nice to Ron. Don't this was the first time they met Ron. Be nice to Ron and all that. And then and then Jeff had a scene a few scenes later where it was just Dad and Blue on the bench. They know that Mom had cancer, and then my Mom and Dad talked about it in the movie, but they didn't show the hospital. They just showed Dad sitting by himself with Blue. And I thought it was a lot more poignant. I thought it was a lot more cinematic, other than beating you over the head with, having Sarah, who played my mom, in the hospital with tubes running out of her. So it was those things that you had to fight. And I think at the end of the day, made it better.
Mm-hmm.
So again, to me, it was most importantly telling the story properly, but making sure that everybody in the family was comfortable of what was being told.
Thinking about self-publishing but not sure where to start? That's where Tellwell Publishing comes in. We offer assisted self-publishing services to help you bring your book to life your way. From editing and design to marketing and distribution, Tellwell's team works with you to create a book you'll be proud of while you keep creative control. From Lamar Jackson and Cindy Cherry to Kaya Usher and Rita Kakati Shah, Tellwell has helped thousands of authors publish their book with confidence. Visit tellwellpublishing.com to start your journey.